And here in a few seconds, we'll introduce Sam. Sam, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. So Sam is joining us all the way from Oaxaca.
And here in a few seconds, we'll introduce Sam. Sam, are you ready?
Okay, so Sam is zooming in all the way from Oaxaca. And I met Sam when he was visiting Austin several years back. He was at Canopy at a weaving studio that was in Canopy, teaching a kind of indigenous, like primary, very basic weaving class. And so I took a class with him, and then I was so happy to run into him again when I was visiting the mountains above where he and his family live and farm in Oaxaca. I was there for a wild mushroom festival several years ago before COVID. And we ran into one another there and have just stayed in contact. And he was very gracious to put together this presentation for us and teach us all about this 10,000-year-old ecosystem. And so I'll let Sam take it away.
Okay, hi. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I think
we're supposed to see him.
My video is not working. Can you activate?
Let's see. I'm going to see if making you a co-host will change it. Does that change it?
Okay. Let's see. Yes.
There we go.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation, Angel and Mary, for coordinating, and our interpreters. Thank you so much. I wanted to have my mom to do a little intro, so maybe just give me a little second. I'll go get her. Just 5 seconds.
What a gorgeous weaving.
Okay. Sorry, it's she was at the back of the house. Just to paint the outline of this talk, in the beginning, I would like to talk about the ancient history of our people. We're the cloud people. We call ourselves Benizaa, which means people from the clouds. And we're known to the world and in the literature as the Zapotecs, which is a word from Nahuatl, which means the land of the zapote. I don't know if you know the zapote fruit. There's different types, like a black zapote and the mamey fruit, and it grows in this valley. So because we were trading with the Aztecs, they call us the zapote. Okay, but we call ourselves Benizaa, and our language is called Dishza, which means words from the clouds. And you probably, some of you have been to Oaxaca, I know, and but if you haven't, if you imagine we have the border with the US, and then Mexico narrows down, and Oaxaca is in the narrowest part of the isthmus. It's called the isthmus of Mexico. It's the narrowest part of the country, and in this narrow stretch of land, there is 16 different. There's 17 different nations. And they are distributed in 8 different regions with very varied ecosystems. right where I am here, I am at about 5,000 feet above sea level. And this is in the Central Valley of Oaxaca. And then from here, we drive 20 kilometers north and we get up to 10,000 feet. So just within a short drive, the change in soils and ecosystem is very dramatic. Here we have, low bushes in the valley, cacti and agaves, and then we transition up north into low deciduous forest and oak forests. And at the top, we have pine forests. And at 10,000 feet, we have cloud forests. So the Zapotec people inhabit those higher mountains from the cloud forests down to the Central Valley, and then down south, all the way south to the Southern Sierra, which with the same transition of ecosystems, and then facing the Pacific. I would like to share my screen, so let me figure this out. I don't know. Because I have a little presentation, but because I'm using my phone, I'm wondering. Okay. How to do this? Okay.
You are on mute.
Hello? Okay, I'm back. Oh, well, technical issues with my PowerPoint, but good news is that I don't need it.
Is your PowerPoint on your computer a different device?
No, it's on my phone, and the reason is my computer, it's really slow, so it's okay.
Well, I was going to say you could log in on your computer and show your PowerPoint from a different one than your phone. Log in on Zoom.
Yeah, but my computer wasn't connecting to the internet, so that's why I ended up making my PowerPoints on my phone. It's just a set of pictures, but
Able to share screen. Does it let you have that option? Do you see that, like where it says
on
share
the,
screen?
on the three
On
dots, right?
It should be on the Zoom at some point. It's an option. It should be on your phone too.
Okay, I tried that. Let's see.
Take your time, no rush.
Apaga esa música. Apaga esa música si estás haciendo tarea.
Okay. No, I'm trying. Three dots. The problem is when I went into my PowerPoint, it logged me out of the Zoom meeting, and that's why I was muted. But
Is
it's
it
okay.
something? Is it something you have in Google Drive? Because you can share it with my email, and I can share my screen.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll share it. I'll share it with you.
Okay.
Okay.
Guys, this is really the first time we've had somebody from another country give a presentation, so bear with us. We're technical difficulties. It's a new challenge for us, and we're very excited to do it. So just bear with us. It takes a little time.
Okay, so I just sent that by email.
Okay.
I hope, yeah, you should get it.
Let's see. I don't see.
Oh, I see.
Angel, did you make Vic an interpreter?
I'm sorry.
Did Vic become an interpreter?
No. Let me.
You got to do that.
Yeah.
I texted you, but I don't think you saw it.
Let's see.
Yeah, okay, it's not going because it's a big file. Yeah. Okay, well,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Is there?
You know.
Okay. We'll look at
Um.
your words.
Yes, it's my talk is mostly, story based. So I've done this many times. Okay. We are in the narrowest part of the country in Mexico. So in this part, like I was saying, there are many different types of soil. Even the soil maps are highly simplified because just from plot of land to another, like from every 100 meters, the soil types changes so much that it's very hard to make an accurate soil map of Oaxaca. This is so much so that the Mixtec region of Oaxaca has been designated as a geopark. This is because there is so many layers of soil strata dating, hundreds of millions of years ago, that it's just an amazing place to visit and to preserve. So Oaxaca is considered as a mega diverse part of the world. And this is because, for example, well, we have access to both from the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico. So naturally, we have different currents of ocean, bringing different nutrients, bringing different ecosystems and ocean life. Out of the 9 turtles that exist, 9 species of turtles that exist in the world, 7 of them lay their eggs on the coast of Oaxaca. Here, I know, for example, in the Central Valley, we have like just on a short walk, birders have seen like more than 200 species of birds on our short walk from my house to the cornfields, to the foothills of the mountain. So it's very, very varied and diverse. And naturally, like I was saying, it's also very culturally diverse. Right now, I'm representing and I'm going to be sharing our stories from the Cloud people perspective. But bear in mind, there is 17 other cultures with their own stories, their own cosmovision. And we say that we came from the same womb, the same philosophical and cultural matrix. We plant corn, we use the same calendar system, we use the same ancient numerical system, and our people have been interwoven by trade and exchange, exchanging seeds, by exchanging art, and this network it's very, very vast. It goes from what we call the Anahuac which is the Nahuatl name for this continent. And one of the descriptions, it's that it means from Teacat, which is understood as Seattle, to Nicaragua. And this combination of words, Teacat and Nicaragua, it's called Sem Anahuac, and means the place surrounded by the great waters. So there were ancient trade routes, uniting all the native peoples from the north to Central America. And of course, there was also even more ancient migrations of our people going as far south, as South America. There is recent understanding of how this continent got populated. And the dates, the archaeological findings are being pushed further and further and further back in time, from 10, 20,000 years ago to 30,000 year old discoveries in a cave in northern Mexico, and even further and further, until you go back to native stories of people, just speaking that we've always been here. The point is that, this continent, the Anahuac continent, or Turtle Island, as is known by the natives up north, it's a place in the world where, we're united from the North Pole to the South Pole. So there is a great degree of knowledge being exchanged and energy that flows, on this land. And so that's part of what I would like to share, part of that ancient understanding of where we're coming from. The cloud people, as our stories or elders tell us, we arrived to this land, and probably since the last ice age, because they remember this Central Valley of Oaxaca being giant lakes where people were hunting and gathering. And there is some foothills right in front of my house where I heard my goats and my sheep. And sometimes I would be walking around the grass fields and finding, arrowheads or really, really old, flint knapping tools, like hammerstones and discards from, thousands and thousands of years before. And so then, or people say that this lake dried out, and then this Central Valley was just like a muddy place. It was like what do you call it? Like a pantano in Spanish. Like a flooded place.
A swamp?
Well, yeah. And so naturally, all this silt, all this accumulated vegetable matter, just build up really good soil. And the Central Valley is really fertile. So the story is roughly that about 10,000 years ago, our ancestors started to domesticate what's called teocintle, which is one of the ancestors of corn. And teocintle it's in the grass family, and it grows, just like 3 feet tall, a bit higher, and produces about 6 to 8 grains or kernels on each corn. So it's the wild plant. It's really not productive for sustenance, for food. But we like to say that we didn't domesticate it, but that we built a relationship with this plant. And by taking care of this plant and providing the needs for this plant, the plant gave in return more and more fruit, more and more food, more and more seeds. And it's a complicated, and there's a whole probably course on evolutionary genetics on how corn came to be the plant that it is. Because if you compare the actual corn plant to the wild type, it's really different. Whereas you could compare rice to wild rice, and the degree of change is small. The same for wheat and other grains. So corn really, it's a plant that just transformed and changed a lot with the interaction with humans. And nowadays, corn cannot survive, as the way it is without human interaction. And so the Central Valley of Oaxaca is considered as, one of the centers of origin of corn. And there is a cave called Gilanakits, which means the white cave, because of the white walls there, the type of soil. And that's where archaeologists found corn kernels that date about 9,500 years ago, give and take. But even before that, other archaeologists have found also gourd seeds in the town of San Juan de la Villa that date about 14,000 years ago. And people were already carrying this knowledge of seed planting. And they were planting their tools, they were planting their gourds and carrying those seeds. So the understanding of, seeds and life was really ancient. And, you don't have to go very far sometimes to understand, that just eating and pooping seeds, spreads that. And sometimes I think we underestimate the knowledge that we already carry from, a long lineage since we escaped Africa 50,000 years ago. So this is the story of corn, and this is the story of our people that is intricately linked with corn. And so allow me to tell you the story of corn. Corn, in synthesis, I'm going to simplify the ancient tales and myths, but pretty much the story goes something like this. The feather snake god, Quetzalcoatl, we call it Belgia, went to the underworld and stole the first kernels of corn from the ants. And it took the kernels of corn back onto the earth and went to a cave to perform the very first ghost dance, in which Quetzalcoatl danced on the kernels and used the bones of a previous generation of humans, because previous to this world, there have been 4 other creations which were either destroyed or self-destroyed by humans and the gods for different reasons. So we're now in the 5th sun, in the 5th era. And anyway, Quetzalcoatl danced and took the bones of the ancestors, the corn, and then with his sweat and a blood offering, he, made this into a dough from which he shaped the very first humans. And then all the gods gathered in a circle and blew the spirits into them. And this is the current generation of humans that, they say are aware and pay respect to the gods. And the story, it's always like, oh, wow, that's mythical, and it's, characters. And when you break down the story and you start to analyzing, and as I started to analyze the story through the eyes of science and through the eyes of history and through the ways of our people, then this story becomes really real. If you think about it, first, ants are the first farmers. Ants, the leaf cutter ants, they collect leaves that they use to feed a fungi from which they feed. And up to this day, farmers would observe ants to predict rain patterns. They can predict rain within a 4-hour to 2-hour time frame based on the ants' activity. And I was just recently just browsing on YouTube and found this Ecuadorian farmer who was describing how there's a type of ant that bites really hard that depends on the moisture from the underground soils to build their nests. So they help locate wells. So ants really, we learn everything from ants. We learn from the first farmers who were keeping the seeds of corn. And it wouldn't surprise me, you know, if out in the wild out there, there's still wild teocintle. I bet ants feed on it too, and they've been also having you know, a relationship with that plant, a mutual beneficial relationship with the plant. So don't kill your ants on your garden. We always say, you know, when we plant corn, we plant three kernels, one for the wild mouse, one for the ants, and one for us. So our view of nature, you know, it's complete. We're part of this whole ecosystem. And then when you go back to the myth and we think about the myth of Quetzalcoatl, the bones of our ancestors, you know, that are in the corn, in the first dough that was used to make humans, is the limestone that we use to cook the corn. And the limestone is, you know, the bones of all the animals that died before us in geological times. It's the skeletons and I don't know what limestone is made of. I think some plant matter too, but a lot of crustaceans and that. But, you know, without the limestone, corn is not a food for human consumption, because the limestone breaks down the proteins and, you know, takes the shell out of the grain and just makes it digestible. So hence the importance of limestone and the symbology of the bones. And then also the dance, the ancient ghost dance, that is used to pray for rain. And I'll talk about that later on when I talk about the rituals. But I just wanted to show how these ancient stories still live in our current modern day practices. They have been evolving through time, and you know, they have been adapting as well, but mainly they remain the same in the ethos and in the essence of our people. So this is how we became the corn people, because we are literally made out of corn. Corn is not only our staple food, it's our spiritual connection that links heaven and earth. And I explain this because, for example, when the West talks about dry farming, we talk about spiritual farming. The way we do this is okay. The way we do this is because when we plant corn, we don't extract water from the earth. We pray for that water to fall. And literally, you know, when we are eating our foods, corn-based foods, we are tasting that rain. There is a direct link from the corn plant to the soil, and then as the corn grows and we pray, it rises up to the heavens, to the clouds. And then when it rains and grows our corn, that rain not only feeds the plants, but feeds our spirit. And that's how a lot of our rituals still have that essence. For example, we plant corn around these days. In these days, we plant corn around since the beginning of June until the first week of July. And depending on where you have your plot, you would have to choose a date on which to plant your corn, because there is many microclimates within the valley that, you know, if you're near this creek or under this foothill, or if you're right in the middle of the valley, you're going to get different rain patterns passing. So it's important, you know, that for us, you know, that we keep this relationship with the land, with the earth, and that we keep observing the cloud patterns. because the more we do that, the more knowledgeable we become of the landscape and of the climate. And also, the more informed we are. But at the end of the day, too, we leave it in the hands of the gods. We say, it's like placing a bet. You never really know how much rain is going to fall. And also the way I think our people have worked around this is that our community, it still holds communal land. So as long as you're part of the community, you have the birthright to have a piece of land to build your own house and to grow your own food. And people would have about 1 hectare of land or 2 here and there. And so they would have, what's it called, hedge their bets, so they have 2 different plots of land, and in any given season, one of them, will do better than the others. So that's how we still plant corn. And just to slow down a little bit and talk more about the corn and the milpa system. When I say corn in English, but in Zapotec, we refer to our crop as gal. And the word gal means also night, and also means the Milky Way. And this is really crucial because for us, it's corn is part of the whole cosmovision of how we were formed, and how we were linked to the cosmos, not just to the earth, but even beyond that. And I remember this because my grandmother, she was very attentive of the sky and the inclination of the Milky Way at night would also, give her clues on whether it's gonna be, a rainy season, whether the rainy season is gonna be, good or bad. And so yeah, it's really, evident in our language and in our practices that this link is real. The other thing too, now in the academy, in the world, in the literature, I think in the mid 90s, or it was recent though that the word for agroecology was started to use. And these places, agriculture or production of food within, the bigger ecological system. And this is important because before the Spanish arrived, our people lived on the foothills of the mountains. And they, would choose a plot of land strategically to be able to plant corn all year round and use water from streams. And they would plant avocado trees around their cornfield. They would also plant all the other fruit trees. And here in the valley, where it's more dry, what we do is we plant acacias. For example, there's one called Wamuchi, and it's a type of acacia that also has an edible fruit, an edible being. And acacias also, have deep, deep roots, and they penetrate the soils, break up the soils, and fix nitrogen. We also plant huaje trees. I don't know the name in English, but actually Oaxaca is named after this tree, the huaje tree, which has an edible fruit. And in the Central Valley as well, we plant nopales and agaves because it's very dry. Pretty much they are our staple vegetable, nopales. Most other vegetables, were brought by Europeans. If you think of carrots, broccoli, maybe, I don't know. But tomatoes are local. There's wild tomatoes and other plants that grow around the milpa system. And then we have what it's well known as the three sister seeds: corn, beans, and squash. As probably you're well versed on this because you're all gardeners, but I'll just repeat it for the sake of information. Corn, it's a grass, and I think it fixes phosphorus on the ground, and then it grows tall, and so that the bean plant can wrap itself around the corn. The bean plant fixes nitrogen on the soil, and the squash has broad leaves to suppress weeds. And these three sisters, as they called, they work together to create an ecosystem that also allows other plants to flourish. For example, you could plant chia seeds, chia and amaranth and chilies and some flowers like cempasúchil in your milpa system. When I talk about the milpa, I talk about this whole ecosystem of plants that are working together to create like a food forest for us. And it goes beyond that because we don't only talk about the plants, but also the fungi and the insects. Unfortunately, with climate change, and I think we're losing also our topsoils for some or another reason. But we used to have way more fungi on our milpas. Right now, around the milpa, we have some wild fungi. It's called nanacate, just little brown mushrooms that grow on the grass around the corn. And also, we have a culture of entomophagy in which we consume the grasshoppers that feed from the bean plant initially and other weeds from the corn, like a type of wild sunflower. It's called acahual in Spanish. I don't know the name in English, but it's like a wildflower, wild sunflower. I've seen it where the buffalo graze actually, which was interesting. And so, here we're talking about a whole food system that we're using and we're cultivating. It's funny because with the grasshoppers, when I was teaching at the local university, we were trying to figure out how to make the grasshoppers hatch all year round because they only hatch with the first lightnings and the first rains of the season. But all the literature on grasshoppers in the developed countries was how to suppress grasshoppers from a cornfield, and we wanted to grow them, and they're considered a pest, and the solution is to just eat them. I think at that time we figured out that grasshoppers, dry grasshoppers, have like 50 to 60% protein and 6 times more iron, zinc, and magnesium than beef. So they're literally another superfood, just like the chia seeds and the amaranth. And they need very little water, very little land to produce food for human consumption. I think the figures were like, to produce a kilogram of beef, you need about 11 kilograms of feed in very highly efficient systems. Whereas to produce grasshoppers, you only need 2 kilograms of feed to produce a kilogram of edible food. So anyway, that's kind of how the milpa system looks like. This milpa system has its variations depending on where it's cultivated. For example, here in the Central Valley, like I said, we plant corn in July, and in July we have the sacred dance. It's called the feather dance, where people they volunteer to to be the feather dancers for a season of 3 years, and they have to throw a party for the whole town. And on this festival, all the ladies, they wear the traditional regalia, which is a blouse embroidered with flowers, and a skirt, a wrap skirt dyed with cochineal, which is a bug that grows on the cactus. And it's all dyed in red, beautiful red colors. And they walk on, they do like a procession around town. And a lot of the decorations, they have baskets with paper flowers, and also they have corn seeds. They use corn seeds to decorate these baskets. And of course, now we live in a mixed culture with a degree of syncretism with Spanish influence and Catholicism. So it's all really mixed. But you know, the ancient stories, the ancient ways still remain there, because as much as the Spanish were trying to impose the religion, the ancient, we call them nahuales, you can understand them as shamans. The ancient nahuales of Mexico, they tweak, you know, those Spanish ways or impositions to preserve the ancient knowledge. So in the early days, people would be carrying out saints, parading saints to pray for rain. But, you know, hidden in those baskets, they will have their ancient, here we call pitao cociu, or pitao cocijo in Spanish, the spirit of lightning. If we go deeper into the spirituality, we don't really talk about gods, but, you know, about essences and spirits. And this comes from a deep understanding of nature. So this is in July, we're planting our corn, and by November, we're ready to harvest it. July, September, October, November, June, July, August, September. So within 4 months, we can harvest corn. Whereas the people that live up in the mountains at 10,000 feet above sea level, they're planting corn right now, around February, March, and they wait until November. I think it's like a 9-month cycle. And so you could imagine all the different species and varieties of corn that we have. There is a seed preservation, like a seed bank in near where I live, in Tanibet, where the ancient caves are. And I forget the numbers, but in Oaxaca or in Mexico, there's like 60 varieties of corn. And in Oaxaca, there is like 40 or something varieties of corn. And they vary in color, in shape and texture, and also in nutrients. You know, like, you know, you have heard the blue corn, which has more antioxidants and with the anthocyanins. And then there is, of course, the white corn and the red corn, which has more like ceremonial uses, and it's also harder, I think, to find. So this is how we currently carry the milpa system. And now I'll describe a little bit of how we work with corn nowadays. I say that we've been tracking climate change thanks to, you know, this observation and through planting corn, because when my great grandfather lived, they would plant corn twice a year. There were so much rain, they were so predictable that they would be planting, you know, around March, and they would plant again in July, late July. And when my grandfather lived, that kind of started to diminish. It was harder and harder to plant twice a year. When my dad's generation, they didn't plant twice a year. He remembers, you know, my grandfather planting twice a year, but when he was in charge of the cornfields. He never planted twice a year. And in my generation, as I started to gain reason and memory, I started to remember years where the corn didn't produce a lot. And of course, before, we had also droughts and periods where corn wasn't being produced. But now, in the last 10, 15 years, it's common to see, we had a 60% yield, 40. Last year, we had only like 10% yield. And so it was very, very, very low that we just saved some seeds for replanting, and we left most of the corn for cattle. So this is how we, in our oral story, we can keep track of things and know how the world is changing. So yeah, this is where we're at now, and the way we do things too. Well, in the past, we would our ancestors would plant corn with mostly it's called acoa, with a stick, and it's like no-till agriculture, right? They would clear a space in the forest and plant the milpa, the corn, beans, and squash, and all the other plants without disturbing the soil too much. And also the way they lived before was way slower, right, than we are. So they had that no-till system, and they were actually not living in the Central Valley. They were living, still following, the seasons and going to the mountains during the dry season and coming to the valley during or wet season to plant more corn where it's more productive. So they were doing this natural flow with the landscape. And since 500 years ago, we settled here in the town in the Central Valley, and we use the mountains to gather firewood. And right now we don't do hunts anymore, but we do some ceremonial hunts once a year. But yeah, we have changed our ways. So since the last 500 years, we adopted into our culture the bull. And so our family also has a herd of, right now we have about 60 plus cows. Mostly we breed these cows to breed bulls to plow the land. And in this way, we could plant bigger fields of corn. And also we have this, relationship with the bull, because once we harvest the corn, all the corn stalk is fed to the bull during the dry season, and it's complemented these days with alfalfa, which is a highly nutritious plant with lots of protein. And just by eating alfalfa and corn stalk, we call zacate, and grass, if you pasture it, you could get really good quality bulls and meat. And also, like I was saying, Oaxaca the terrain is so rugged. There's villages up there in the mountains where it's even, in some places, it's even impossible to use bulls, and they still do the traditional stick planting. In other places where they have some flat lands, they come to the valley and get bulls in the valley and take them up there to plow their lands. Where we are in the Central Valley, my dad invested some of his money to buy a tractor. So these days we use a tractor to plow and to plant the corn. And this is mainly because the price of corn has been pushed down so much by subsidies in the US And most developed countries, it's like I think they call it national security, food sovereignty. But what this is doing, is pushing our work, or the value of our work, so low that planting corn, it makes no sense in economic terms. Of course, we don't plant corn for financial gain, but because it's part of our way of life. But what that does is that it pushes people out of the land, because in order to trade for other things, if you invest your time and effort in growing corn, everything else is so expensive. So in a way, it's a way of oppression to the indigenous people of these corn lands in what we call the Anahuac. So this is also part of why migration happens, because if you don't have, luckily we weave rugs and we have a craft to trade with the world. But other parts of the world, we've other villages with maybe baskets, or make pottery that is harder to export, or they make huaraches for the locals. So up until now, now Oaxaca is more trendy, and people want to dress like us and want to wear huaraches and want to use clay pots. But back in the days, that wasn't the case. So it was hard to trade. And, it's part of the hardships of being a farmer, a native farmer here. And I think that's partly true across this land. The same happens with coffee. Other places where they grow coffee, or mangoes, or watermelons, or pineapples, the same stories. The big corporations would come and buy in bulk and push down the prices to the local producers. So that's pretty much how we are with corn these days. And we've have embraced a degree of technology in terms of equipment, and we have a mill where we process our corn faster. But we're really defending our corn from other technologies that are not appropriate, like genetically modified organisms. And luckily, our current government took a stance, and it's prohibiting GMOs from entering Mexico. And Mexico is really, different. From Mexico City to the south, it's different to the north. The north is more industrialized, and it's more of an agro-business model, where people are pushing for high yields, pushing for the green revolution, pushing for, like, they put the national complaint when our government bans Roundup, because they were like, oh, we're gonna get only 40-60% yields. We're gonna grow mostly weeds, because if we stop using these pesticides, it's not gonna, we cannot compete with the world. But that's because I think, from my perspective, is that the developed world is doing corn wrong. And in order to rebalance the relationship of humans with the planet, we need to heal our relationship with corn. For example, all the fertilizers, used in corn or in agriculture end up in the Mississippi River and going to the Gulf of Mexico, causing, a big dead zone. That's, I don't remember, as big as, Texas or something. It's huge. It's creating a problem. And this monoculture, is driving species extinction, the loss of species, and the loss of insects in the fields. It's incredible. It's not just the bee, it's all the other little insects that are also dying with them. And so the world really needs to come to terms, with our food production systems. And it's time to, I say, and the way I see it, it's time to root back in these ancient ways of knowledge, in these ancient ways of doing things. so that our technology could adapt. I'm not against technology, you know, but in my wildest dreams, I imagine, you know, small little solar power equipments, you know, helping us maybe, you know, plow or something, or, you know, it can be done. It's just that we just need to shift the way we see things. And that's just my plea to the world, that we return corn to its sisters, to the three sisters, or more, you know, to the whole ecosystem. And for example, in our language, to say sister, we say bizana, which means my being, because, you know, the brother and sisters are like the corn and the bean plant, helping each other, supporting each other to grow. That's how embedded this knowledge is in our culture. And so I think it is possible. And there is a change, you know, like I've heard the last conversation. If we all grew, you know, instead of lawn, if we grow food, and if we all grew a little patch, because we don't need that much, but the more of us that grow a little patch of food, the more we can create this change. So yeah, I think that's my plea and my message, and that's it with the corn. Now I think I will transition to talk about our weaving, which goes hand in hand with the corn, because I think most native cultures, you know, they would produce food, and they say that the corn system is so efficient, you know, that you put the work in 4 months, from preparing the land, you know, doing some weeding and harvesting and processing and storing your corn. But with 4 months of work, you have food and security for the rest of the year. That's incredible. You know, which society now, you know, works 4 months and takes the rest of the year off? And, you know, where is progress, you know, in terms of quality of life? It's even more intense with the chinampa system that the Mexicas developed on lakes, where they would have not only corn, but, you know, all other plants. There's many edible plants that are cultivated in Mexico, like the ancient tomatoes, and there's one that looks like broccoli. It's called huasontle, and all the we call them quelites, which are types of amaranth. And, you know, many other plants and flowers and fruits. And I'm not to talk about the chinampa, but you could look it up. And it's a highly efficient system on which you dig mud from like a lake, and you build a mat of reeds, and then you build the soil and put soil and fertilizers. And then the plants, you plant trees that hold that little island, and then the plants have constant access to nutrients and water. It's impressive. So with this, you know, plant knowledge, or people were able to develop a highly sophisticated culture. You might have heard of Monte Alban, which was the first city built on this continent. We call it in our native language, Dying Bass, which is the sacred Jaguar Mountain. It's known as Monte Alban by archaeologists. But this place, it's just like 20 minutes from Oaxaca City, but it has a lot of firsts. Monte Alban developed the first calendar system, or, you know, laid the grounds for the first calendar system and the first alphabet. And this was built on a huge mountaintop. The top was flattened. I think it's the size of like 5 football fields. But flattening a mountaintop, it's already a feat of engineering, because it's flattened to perfection. And they did that without heavy machinery. And then all the buildings are aligned with astronomical phenomena. There's a particular one that's called the J building and the P building. I think the J building is, well, all the buildings are aligned with the cardinal points, with walls facing north, south, east, and west. But the J building, it's jagged. And they say that the J building is pointing at an angle where the sun rises on the 8th of March. 8th or 10th of March, I'm gonna get my dates wrong. But that's the date on which the sun rises and elevates right above the zenith, right above our heads. On that date, at roughly 1:20 p.m., the sun is right in the zenith and there is no shadows. And the light could travel and illuminate a well. They used this observation and they built a chamber to channel light, from the top of this temple into the ground, to symbolize that fertility, that life that comes from the sun. And this phenomenon happens, year after year, exactly at the same time. It happens again because, as we know, the sun, as we go through winter, it travels south. Every sunrise happens further and further south, and then as we come through summer, it travels north. Anyway, it happens again around, I think, the 8th of August, around the same time. But they use that astronomical phenomena to calibrate their calendar and, to start to count the days. The calendar system is shared, across this whole continent, and it's it also uses observations of Venus, which has a cycle of 584 days, and it even includes alineations with the Pleiades. I think every 52 years or something. There's some alignment that happens with Pleiades, and it goes even further than that. The Mayans kept really good records, and they're known, to have recorded dates. They have cycles, in the Mayan calendar, which is literally the same calendar. It's just, we talk about the Mayan version or the Zapotec version or the Mexica version of the same calendar. But modern astronomers, it took them, using atomic clocks and computer systems, computing power, to understand and to realize that the Mayan calendar is so precise. It's acknowledged to have deviation of 0.019 splits of a second, every year. Whereas our current way of counting for days, I think we lose like a couple minutes every year in spite of adding a gap year. And that's why, for example, when the Spanish came, their calendar was, I think, already behind 10 days or something. But anyway, this is just to show that this culture has developed, such a refined understanding of the cosmos. And I already talked about, the corn plant, of their ecology too, but also of the human spirit. This is shown, if you, Angel, can share the link for Mitla, because Mitla was a sacred place built in the post-classic, I think roughly around 700 of the current era, where these geometric patterns that we weave on our rugs were literally, I would say, woven on stone. The walls of Mitla were put together without any kind of cement, and the walls are tilted like this at an angle. Actually, the base, it's like, a triangle, like a pyramid, and then the actual wall is tilted like that. I'm exaggerating. And then on the walls, there is this intricate fretwork, like these patterns, where, they join together little slabs of rock on top of each other to create these geometric patterns. So Mitla, it's we call them like centers of knowledge. They're not ruins, they're not pyramids, they are centers of knowledge, like we have research centers and universities in our modern days. There is different sacred places where communities and villages will send their kids to be educated in all aspects of life, from hunting, weaving, making pottery, or learning the calendar, maths, to learning about spirituality. So all these topics were covered in these sacred places like Montalban and Mitla. So Mitla was known for really renowned healers and seers, and we call them nahuales or shamans. And so I believe, that these patterns and symbols that they wove on these walls is literally, encrypted knowledge, because symbology is the first way of communicating. Or alphabet, before being an alphabet, it's a set of symbols that communicate knowledge. So let me start by talking about the pattern behind me, which is this rug. If you see closely, that's the pattern that you get when you join your hands in this way, right? And we call this the cycle of life. This pattern has 4 steps, just like we have 4 knuckles. Actually, this pattern right here has more than 4 steps, but in case you're paying attention, there is another version that has 4 steps. And they say that each step represents 13 years of life. So that we go, I'm gonna point out here, if we can do that, right? We start at the base, the opposite. We start at the base and then we grow. That's the growth stage of life. And every 13 years, there would be a ritual to go through. And, I won't repeat this and go into too much detail, but every 13 years, there is a big change in our physiology and in our spirit. So we go, from 0 to 13 to 26 to 39 to 52. And 52 is a sacred number in our calendar system. Every 52 years, the solar and the moon calendar kind of like align themselves. And I think the Pleiades as well appear on the same spot in the sky. And in our lives, when we reach 52 years old, we probably, have grown up, worked a lot, started a family, build a trade or something. But then we start to ask ourselves, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of all this? That, middle-age crisis where you buy a Ferrari or an extra farm. They say that the ritual to go through, to sit through, is called recapitulation. And this is sitting down and meditating on your life's experiences to process, each experience that you can remember from your day, from today, all the way back to as far as you can remember. And to process and analyze those life experiences with, the advantage of experience and life and time, to distill them into knowledge and wisdom that you could pass to the next generations. This, it's what it's called an examined life. They say that it becomes our natural duty to distill all these life's experiences and to pass them down in terms of stories to the next generations. And then, like the line flattens like this, and then it goes down, because for another 13 years, our bodies, are gonna start pointing towards the earth. And we're gonna need support from friends and family, just like when we were kids. And as we start to get old, then for another 13 years, the line lays flat and horizontal again as we walk towards our death. And then it comes back again and starts over another cycle of life and death. So you cannot understand life without, understanding death as part of this duality. This pattern that I just explained starts to evolve because it starts to curl like this. So what you see there on this rug is a pattern that's more curled, because now each step is not representing a biological growth, but that spiritual growth that we take when we embrace the path of the warrior. And this basically means that in order to grow, we need to embrace death as not something that you fear, but as your advisor. And in this ancient way of knowledge, people would go through different stages of learning. Like I said before, from learning how to grow your own food and hunt, to doing long pilgrimages to these sacred sites to learn from the ancient Nahuales, to using sacred plants to expand our vision and our ways of perception, to mastering our dreams, so that we make the unconscious conscious, and we can link, what we call or Nahual awareness, which is the world of the spirit, to the world of logic and language. And then at the end, the shamans, they will literally put you in life and death situations in a controlled manner. There's ancient rituals in the old tales. Because if you think about it, and if you've read stories of survival, if you're grounded, if you've gone through some of this training or these experiences in life, and when you're in a life and death situation, you bring the best of yourself. And that's pretty much what the path of the warrior means. It means that, like the Buddhists explain, your mind stops swinging from worrying about the future to regretting the past. You're fully present in a life and death situation. You bring the best of yourself. A lot of this knowledge was hinted at in the 60s, with the writings of Carlos Castaneda and the teachings of Don Juan. Although it really makes them, people got trapped into just eating sacred plants and peyote, and forgetting the internal work, the internal battle, the internal work to let the conscious flourish. Lately, also Don Miguel Ruiz wrote the 4 Agreements, and there's more and more writers tapping into this ancient knowledge, which it's been dubbed as Toltecayot, which means a balanced way of life. Eventually, as we complete this journey to find our true faith and our true heart, there is a symbol that we weave, which has this pattern, which is, the pattern that we have here. And it's a curl pattern that it's sacred geometry, it's fractals. It's called the Fibonacci series, which is the distance between this part and then this part. It's hard to see. And then this part and then this part. So that's an example, of I have some other patterns here of the level of understanding and the philosophy encrypted into these symbols. I will talk about one more set of symbols, and then I will open up to questions and answers to give some time to people who have to leave at 8. Okay, the other pattern that is very common. Actually, I have it woven on this shirt, which is from the Amuzcos region, and It's the diamond pattern, like here. Right. This diamond pattern, it tells us about the equilibrium of the four energies that were used to create the universe. Just like we have four directions, four cardinal points to locate ourselves on the earth and ground ourselves, there's four elements, basic elements, through which we could relate with the natural world. The same is true for our body. Our body could be split in four. From the navel is the center that holds our energy together. From the navel to the head, we have the bird energy, which we can understand as the spiritual energy of humans. We have organs like the heart or guts, the brain, the pituitary gland that create gut feelings, emotions, thoughts, dreams that are intangible but that can transform the world. So like I said before, as much as we're inheriting our DNA, we're also inheriting stories and teachings that are intangible. And what is civilization but a collection of stories that we have chosen to believe? What is democracy? What is capitalism? It's just a set of beliefs that we have chosen to believe to build the structure of society. And also, the beauty of this understanding is that it's just a story. We can change that story and believe something that's more appropriate to our times, or that the earth needs, that humanity needs. That's the kind of spiritual pursuits that our ancestors wanted us to follow. And then from the navel and below, we have our kidneys that are cleansing our bodies, or reproductive organs that are ensuring the preservation of our genes or species, or legs for survival. Those that energy that grounds us to the earth, to the planet. That's represented with the snake. Why? Because the snake walks with its full body on the ground. The snake is fully grounded. We as humans, we have we have been humans like for less than 2 million years. We've been walking upright for less than 2 million years. So we're the babies of the planet. Snakes have been snakes for more than 100 million years. And our ancestors used snake rituals and medicines to connect with the snake, to gain visions from the snake, to learn how to live on Earth. Because the snake, as much as it walks with its full body on the ground, it also depends on the sun to warm its blood. And it's completely balanced between heaven and earth. Also, nowadays, our current medicines, for example, I think our antibiotics are losing efficiency and potency. So scientists are turning back to snakes because they can produce really complex molecules in their venom. Anything is a venom or medicine depending on the doses. So humanity will start to look back at snake literally to find medicines for the future. And spiritually, the snake has teachings for us for how to live in harmony with the earth. So the balance between these energies, it's what we call the Quetzalcoatl, the feather snake, and that's a state in which we're grounded on earth and working towards those spiritual pursuits. And then also our left and our right side of our awareness, it's balanced. Our left side, where we have our heart, we have our Nahual awareness, our dreams and our intuition that connects us to the spiritual world. And on our right side, we have what we call the tonal, or in Zapotec, the latli, which allows us to create language and logic and music and mathematics to understand the patterns of the cosmos and nature. And when we unite these four awarenesses in this, balanced cross, or this symmetrical diamond, we can see the world through, the eye of God, the eye of the feather snake, like a third eye, so that wisdom and love can come to our life. I could talk more and more, like 4 hours nonstop about this topic, but we're running out of time, and I would like to open up for questions and answers.
I would love to hear more about the plants you use to dye the yarn wool. Do you grow those, or you can tell us about that?
Okay, I'll talk about 3 main plants. First plant, of course, it's marigold, cempasúchil, which it's also a medicinal plant. It's also edible. And we grow the cempasúchil with the corn and or next to the corn. And there is farmers actually nowadays that fully dedicate to growing cempasúchil, because Dia de Muertos is such a big celebration and the demand for it is so big that what we do for rugs is that we wait after Dia de Muertos when the price drops down, and then we buy cempasúchil flowers and we store them for all year round. We dry them and we use the flowers to dye. We fix the dyes with alum powder, although in the past we also used some roots of some plants that we gather in the mountains. We also use other like, what do you call those, oak galls, and also pomegranate skins. Anything that's high in tannins scratches the surface of the wool to let the dye molecules adhere to it. So that's how we mordant our wool. And then another amazing plant that we use is we call it Jiquilit or Jiquilit. It's known as anil in Spanish, or indigo, which is, I think, Indigofera subtropicosa, which is a native plant of this continent. There is mummified, there's a mummy in Peru that dates about 6,000 years ago that was wearing a cloth made out of dyed with indigo, of this particular indigo. Previous to that discovery, the oldest textile was thought was an Egyptian cloth that dated like 3,000 years ago. But imagine 6,000 years ago, it's a long time, that people were using this plant. So indigo, it's I think it's called indigo tin, the molecule that makes blue, and it's found in many plants. But this particular plant, Jiquilite or anil, has a high concentration of it. There is a town called Niltepec in Oaxaca, which literally means indigo lands, indigo hills. And it's a town that boomed with the jeans industry in the US, because in the beginning, the jeans were dyed with indigo. And all the ancient, also the ceremonial clothing were dyed with blue, like with our ancestors. But anyway, they process, they have to plant like from a hectare of indigo, I think it's like 2 acres of land, they would get 100 pounds of dye stuff every 2 years. And they use limestone to extract the indigo, and they use a local fruit to add fructose to balance the pH, and it's a whole process. But they would extract the indigo, and it will the indigo will like sit down into the bottom of big fermentation tanks, and then they would extract the indigo and make that into a paste and shape it into little balls that they would use as coin in the past, and we still buy and trade for to make blues. Okay, and the last one is Cochineal, which is another insect. It's Dactylopius coccus costa that grows on the prickle pear cactus. it's another, domesticated plant. It's a cactus that has no thorns. I believe it was bred to have no thorns. It doesn't propagate, by seed. You have to, take a cutting and plant it. And so cochineal, it has carbonic acid in its blood because, as I understand, this insect, evolved to make itself unpalatable to predators, because once it hatches, it only has 3 days to pick up a spot around, in a prickle pear cactus, and dig a hole with its proboscis and feed from the sap. So it has no way to move around to defend itself. So what it made itself unpalatable to predators. And another, it's another insect that our ancestors domesticated, because if you see cochineal in the wild, I think there is in southern Texas. There is definitely in Texas, I found it. But if you collect insects from the wild and you weigh them and use the same amount of cochineal that is cultivated, the cultivated cochineal is 4 times as powerful. It's 4 times more powerful than the wild type. It has way more concentration of carbonic acid. With cochineal, you get shades of dark red. If you add lime juice to that, it turns brighter and brighter all the way to an orange. And if we use limestone on the dye bath, it makes the cochineal turn purple, because the pH is basic, as contrary with the lime juice, it's acidic. So now
you're talking about limestone as opposed to lime fruit.
Yes, yeah, limestone. And now you have yellow, blue, and red, and you could mix them to create all the other colors.
I do a bit of eco printing with plants on paper.
Yes. Okay. We have some questions. Let's see. What can we do with the ants in the garden? Okay. What I heard from this guy in Ecuador is that these particular ants, you put a shade on them, and the shade, they need the sun to work with their nest. But if you put a shade on them, they will move the ant's nest. So you could chase them away, by putting a shade over their nest. You don't need to kill them. That's how you could, have them move around. They move around the higher ground when wet. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
I was going to ask about when I first learned about cochineal, I learned that it was one of the major exports in the 15th century, and it really grew the whole economy of Mexico. And when the British Revolutionary soldiers started wearing that bright red, it really kind of boosted their image and probably helped them in their efforts of colonization. And I find that to be such a very interesting dynamic to see.
Yeah.
The global trade and the sort of this, just this one natural dye color sort of.
Yeah, there's a book called A Perfect Red, which, in a really well-written, joyful read, describe how this humble bug changed the politics and the economics of 16th century Europe. Red was such a scarce color, like you mentioned. It was only reserved for the royals, and there were strict rules of who could wear red and purple. Even if you were rich, if you weren't, related to the royalty, you couldn't wear those colors. And yes, it allowed Oaxaca to flourish and as a colonial city, and that's why we have Santo Domingo Church covered in gold, because of the trade with cochineal. And also the native people, had this knowledge that the Spanish didn't have. They had all the networks and the trade routes and the producers where they could collect a lot of cochineal. There is accounts of English pirate, forget his name, but seizing a boat, vessel with 20 tons of cochineal. And that, that's when it landed in the British, it supplied the British for a long time, and that guy got a knighthood, and it was and then the French were sending spies to Oaxaca to figure out, where cochineal grew. The Dutch as well, and the best scientists in Europe couldn't tell if this thing was either a bug, a berry, or a worm. They were like, what is this? Is it a grain, a worm? They even came up with the term, the worm berry. So yeah, I recommend that book. It's very interesting.
So they say, what other ways are there? Or is there a way to use amaranth as a dye?
Not that I know of, but they use a blue corn and other types of corn to dye, and beans as well. Just not aware of amaranth, but the textile knowledge is so vast in the whole state of Oaxaca, and even the whole Anahuac. Yeah, I've never used amaranth.
I've used amaranth as a dye.
Yeah.
Yeah, the amaranth flowers, when they're red before it makes the seed, I've steamed it on paper with like soy milk as a fixative, and it comes out beautiful red.
Is it light sensitive? No. Oh, nice. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it makes a beautiful.
And then
here amaranth is so precious. We just eat it because we could make purples and reds with cochineal.
There's another question about other uses for the marigold. Yeah,
the marigold. It's used. I'm not too knowledgeable on the medicinal aspects, but I know it's used as you could brew it into a tea for certain ailments, and you could use different parts of the plant. It's a mosquito repellent. If you put it around in a jar, it will repel mosquitoes. The wild version, Tagetes lucida, it's called pericon. It's also used like anise seed, like chamomile, like a wild chamomile, and different uses.
Forrest asks, to eat the grasshoppers, do you remove the head or legs before cooking? I remember being on the street everywhere in Mexico, and they're everywhere. They're already kind of cooked, like popped or something. Yes. I don't remember them having. They did have heads and legs, didn't they?
They do. Well, we eat them since they're little, like this little, like 2-3 weeks old. I don't know, like a month. As soon as you can catch them, and obviously they're so tiny, you can just chew them up easily. And towards November, then they're fattening up and feeding onto the actual corn plant. The taste also changes, and obviously also their legs are much more serrated. And my mom always removes them, but she just removes the legs. I prefer to chew my way through that hard shell for extra roughage.
In the fanciest restaurants, they have them on dishes.
Yes, there's grasshoppers, yes. And there's another moth that lays its eggs and on the agave plants, and it's the agave worm. And another one is the actually a type of ants, the red ants as well. They once a year they fly around. They're called chicatanas, and I don't know, the females, they fly around and they catch them. People catch them and make them into really good salsa, really nutty flavors, and other types of ant eggs. And it's called escamoles. Lots of insects.
Does anyone want to speak up and have a question?
Yeah, someone, I was going to ask about huitlacoche. That's something that we know a couple of farmers that have had, have grown it accidentally. But is it something that in your region, do people inoculate their corn with the fungus?
Yeah, no, we don't. Typically, we just, we get what we have randomly by nature. But there is researchers in Mexico who have come up with a way to inoculate the corn plant with La Coche. I think they patented that, and you have to do it in the early stages of the plants, and yeah, you can grow it commercially nowadays.
Anyone want to speak up with their question?
Yes, I had a question as to whether there are truffles found in the forests of Oaxaca.
Oh, thank you. Somebody saying thank you. I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. No, like the Spanish truffles that the pigs hunt.
Right.
Or other mushrooms that people harvest there?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. Until that time we went to the forest the fungi festival, mushroom festival. We collected 140 types of mushroom, and yeah, we eat a lot of, well, not 140, but like 20 types. Like we have all them all. You can name them better than me, Angel.
I actually really like the common names that I learned when I was there a few times, like the egg mushroom. It's bright orange, and it's in the Amanita family, and it's really bright and big. And in Europe, they call it Caesar's mushroom because only Caesar was able to eat it, because I think it was pretty rare. So I prefer the learning the common names because there's so many beautiful stories. But I think in Texas, it grows in East Texas, and I think there's one that's related to it that's more reddish but very similar. That's called like the Amanita jacksoni. So it's more of just kind of a generic Latin name with some probably last name attached to it somehow.
It smells so nice downstairs, Ames.
Oh.
My favorite mushroom is well, in Zapotec it's called Bayagit, which translates as the pine mushroom, and I don't remember the scientific name, but I went to a talk where the villagers in Cochineal were growing it commercially, and this mushroom comes out with the first strikes of lightning, with the first thunderstorms, and it's so good. I think they have to climb a little bit to get it, but that's my favorite type.
Any other questions that want to come forward?
You mentioned GMOs have been banned in Mexico.
Yes, yeah, they have. Our current government prohibited their, I think, their import in Mexico as well as Roundup. But I think that's being contested, so it's still a legal battle. But yeah, I think only a few farms can grow it. I'm not sure in the north of Mexico who were already growing it, but at least I know that further imports are not possible.
Good.
Well, Sam, those farmers who said that since Roundup would no longer be available, they would now have a serious decrease in their produce. Has that proven to be so?
This was this agricultural cycle that just ended. So, and it was a gradual ban. They would, they had a plan for reducing the imports on Roundup. But you know, on the radio they were claiming they would have like 40% decrease, but I am not aware of any figures that have come out.
Well, beautiful. Unless we have any other questions, I really appreciate you coming, and what an awesome talk.
Yeah, really.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank you. And I wanted to ask my mom to maybe close this. I wanted her to open this conversation, but she was really busy doing other things. So you can have that. I'll translate for her. She'll speak in Zapotec.
Excellent.
And,
We did
Sam, thank you.
last question. If we have room for one more.
Yes, I'm-
my mom, Leonor.
Sayu, very bad, you.
She's asking how is everybody doing?
We are good.
Lovely to see you.
We are good.
Lazer, Beautysta Samuel, historias de Teotitlán del Valle.
Did you like the history of Teotitlán that I just told you all about?
Good.
Very much. Yes.
Donungo, caro te cuyo, Sarayen se encontrar.
She's you know, asking if anybody would like to come and see our farm and our weavings in Oaxaca.
We'll be there next year. Going to Oaxaca next year, I'll come.
Well,
Esperamos un día que venga a conocer nuestro taller en Teotitlán del Valle para que vea usted nuestro trabajo.
And she's the one who runs everything. She runs the show, the farm, the business, the rug, the cooking. Yeah.
Vamos a divertirnos mucho.
I put Sam and his family's website in the chat, and they do homestay visits, and you can learn all about their the tapestries and the beautiful rugs that they create on the website. So yeah, so if you visit the website, you can learn more, and hopefully everyone can make it down to see them after the pandemic's over.
Yes. We're gonna get our vaccines and everything, I hope. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Hope to see you.
If you have further questions or specifics, you know, feel free to contact me through the website or my social media. I'm on Instagram a lot. It's Dixa Rugs Native Farm. Maybe Angel, you could type it there. I have a Facebook fan page. It's called Dixa Rugs Organic Farm, on my website, obviously. And yeah, thank you all so much. And I hope that you plant corn with the three sisters, and you let, you know, all that ecosystem flourish. Plant flowers, plant chilies, all, you know, create an ecosystem, and don't kill the ants or the grasshoppers.
We love that. Thank you
Me
so
dio
much.
mucho gusto conocerla. Sí.
Thank you so much.
Bye, bye, bye.
Gracias. Adios.
Everyone, next month is
Sí.
post.
Feliz Día de Mujeres.
Happy International Women's Day.
Sí, gracias.
Bye, bye.
Bye bye.
Adios.
Bye, everyone.
Till next month. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
That was fun.
That was fun. Yeah.
Thank you very much for put this together.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
This was a